The first Imperial world to die was Zerion Prime, and it died beautifully. The Garden Planet had been home to 50 million alien colonists who enjoyed lives of luxury built on the backs of slave labor. Governor Zalak had ruled from his crystal palace for 20 years, growing fat on taxes stolen from conquered worlds, but his reign ended in fire. Captain Min's destroyer Bad News emerged from hyperspace directly above the capital city. Her ship was small and old, but it carried something. The Imperial fleet had never seen before quantum torpedoes designed by human engineers who had grown tired of playing fair. The weapons struck the orbital defense platforms before the aliens even knew they were under attack. The platforms exploded, like dying stars, sending cascades of burning metal down onto the planet below. Governor Zalak was enjoying his morning meal when the sky began to rain fire. His palace windows melted from the heat, and his guards ran screaming through corridors that were filling with toxic smoke. Captain Min's ship dove toward the planet's surface, while Imperial fighters swarmed around her like angry insects. Her shields failed, and her hull began to glow red from atmospheric friction, but she kept diving, straight toward the governor's palace. Her crew sang old Korean war songs as their ship became a meteor. The impact vaporized 3 city blocks and sent a mushroom cloud rising into the morning sky. Governor Zalak had barely enough time to realize. He was about to die before the explosion turned him into component atoms. The Crystal Palace that had stood for centuries became a crater that would glow for years, but Zerion Prime was just the beginning. Captain Lee's battle group hit 3 Imperial colonies, simultaneously using tactics that no sane military force would ever attempt. Her ships rammed orbital stations, loaded themselves with nuclear charges, and used their own crews as living weapons. The aliens had never seen anything like it. Industrial world of Korvax had been strip mining rare metals for the Imperial war machine, using human slave labor in underground tunnels. Factory manager Yang had been forced to work in those mines for 3 years, watching aliens grow rich while human children died in cave-ins. Now he had his chance for revenge. When Captain Bay's assault ships appeared in orbit, Yang led 10,000 miners in a coordinated uprising. They turned fusion cutters into weapons and cargo haulers into assault vehicles. The alien overseers died screaming as their own machines crushed them into paste. The mines that had been prisons became tombs. Yang himself strangled. Supervisor Kex with his bare hands in the main control room. The alien had whipped Yang's son to death 2 years ago for working too slowly. Now Yang squeezed until Kex's purple face turned black and his 4 eyes rolled back in his head. The other miners cheered and began hunting down every alien on the planet Admiral Co's battlecruiser. Group approached the fortress world of Drac using a battle plan that looked like suicide. The planet was protected by mountain bunkers that could withstand orbital bombardment and energy shields that could stop nuclear weapons. But SEO had something better than nuclear weapons. Her ships carried shaped charges designed by Chief Engineer Han, who had studied alien architecture for 5 years. The charges were made to turn solid rock into liquid fire and Imperial bunkers into crematoriums. The first salvo punched through the mountain shields like they were made of paper. Colonel Vorth commanded the fortress and had bragged that his defenses were impregnable. He had defeated 6 alien rebellions and crushed a dozen slave uprisings, but he had never faced humans who were willing to die just to hurt him. His last transmission was a prayer to alien gods who were too busy dying to listen. The fortress held for exactly 18 minutes before its nuclear reactor went critical. The explosion cracked the planet's crust and sent lava fountains shooting into space. Every alien on Drac died in the first few seconds, but the planetary core kept burning for hours like a second sun. Similar attacks were happening across 50 Imperial systems. In the first hour alone, human fleets appeared without warning, struck with absolute fury, and left nothing alive behind them. The Empire's communication networks burned along with their worlds, leaving isolated colonies to face their doom alone, Captain. Park commanded the assault on the luxury resort world of Veltar, where Imperial officers brought their families for vacation. His teams moved through the tropical paradise like silent death, using weapons that left no bodies behind, just empty clothes. And the smell of ozone. The aliens on Veltar thought they were safe because the planet had no strategic value and was far from any fighting. But the humans were not fighting for strategy anymore. They were fighting for revenge, and no Imperial citizen was innocent in their eyes. The resort became a ghost town in 6 hours. Commander Thex tried to organize a defense of the mining colony on Asteroid 7, but his troops were panicking. The humans were not following any logical military doctrine. They were simply destroying everything they could reach as quickly as possible. Thex's last message to Imperial Command was a warning that came too late. "They are not fighting a war," he transmitted, as Captain Ryu's fighters swarmed around his ship. "They are performing an extermination. Send everything you have, because they are not taking prisoners." The message reached Imperial headquarters just as Thex's ship exploded in nuclear fire. The human attacks followed no pattern that Imperial strategists could understand. Some worlds died from orbital bombardment while others fell to ground assault. Some colonies were poisoned while others were simply rammed by ships traveling at light speed. The only constant was that nothing survived. Dr. Kim had been treating injured civilians on the medical station orbiting Helix 4 when the war reached her system. She could have evacuated, but instead she loaded her hospital ship with biological weapons that could kill every living thing on a planet. The station's defenses lasted 12 minutes. Engineer Park sabotaged the power grid on Industrial World 9, turning the fusion reactors into bombs that cooked the atmosphere. His sacrifice killed 12 million aliens and left the planet uninhabitable. For the next 1,000 years, his last words were transmitted across the galaxy. Kim Tae remembers. The pattern repeated endlessly across Imperial space. Human ships appeared struck with devastating force and vanished back into the void they were. Not trying to hold territory or capture resources, they were simply making the Empire pay for every human life that had been lost, and the price was total extinction. Captain Song's merchant vessel, Peaceful Dawn, carried a cargo hold full of antimatter. That had been meant for mining operations. Now it carried volunteers who knew they were flying to their deaths. The ship struck the trade station above Commerce World and turned 50 billion credits worth of Imperial goods into expanding Plasma Admiral. Park watched the reports flooding in from across the galaxy and allowed himself a thin smile. His people were dying, but they were taking the Empire with them. Kim Tae had been 15 years old when he died. Now 15 Imperial worlds burned in. His memory and the burning had just begun. The Empire had ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years, but they had never faced an enemy like this. Humans who were willing to sacrifice everything for revenge, aliens who cared nothing about survival only, about making their enemies pay. The first day of the real war was ending, but the night would be worse. Imperial colonies were sending desperate messages to their homeworld, begging for evacuation or reinforcements. But the messages were being intercepted by human ships that used the coordinates to plan their next attacks. No Imperial world was safe, and no alien life would be spared. Kim Tae had thrown one rock and died for it, but his death had become 1,000 rocks flying through space at the speed of light. Each one carried the fury of humanity and the promise that his sacrifice would not be forgotten. The boy was dead, but his war had just begun. Time moved differently after Kim Tae died. The first minute felt like hours as humans across the galaxy stared at their screens in shock. The boy was gone, turned to light and memory, but his image burned in their minds like a brand. Every parent, Saw their own child on that platform, every brother and sister felt the chains on their wrists. In the asteroid field where Admiral Park's fleet was hiding, the silence stretched until it became painful. His flagship carried 3,000 crew members, and all of them had watched the execution. No one spoke or moved. They just stood at their stations with faces made of stone and hearts full of fire. Captain. Li Jin was the first to break the terrible quiet. Her voice shook as she read the reports, coming in from across human space. Every ship, every station, every hidden colony was sending the same message. They had all seen what happened to Kim Tae, and they all wanted to know what came next. The second minute brought the first signals. Intelligence. Networks that had been built over years of secret war began to hum with activity. Messages flew between ships faster than light itself, but they were not asking for orders or battle plans. They were simply saying the same thing over and over. We saw. We remember. We will not forget. Admiral Park finally moved from his command chair. His legs felt heavy like he was walking through deep water, but his mind was crystal clear. He had fought the Empire for 5 years, always planning, always thinking about the long war ahead. But the long war was over now. The time for planning had ended. In the third minute, something happened that had never occurred in human history. Every military unit in the galaxy began to move toward Imperial space. No orders were given. No grand strategy was announced. They simply knew what had to be done. The boy had died alone, but his death would not go unanswered. Captain Min was leading a patrol near the outer colonies when the broadcast reached her ship. Her crew was made up of volunteers from 12 different worlds, and they had been fighting hit-and-run battles for months. Now they turned their ships toward the nearest Imperial system without waiting for permission. Chief Engineer Ryu was working in the deep engine rooms of Park's flagship when he felt the ship change course. He smiled grimly and began opening storage compartments that had been sealed since the war began. Inside were weapons that could destroy worlds and poisons that could kill suns. These had been saved for the darkest hour, but that hour had come. The fourth minute saw technical preparations that would have taken weeks under normal circumstances. Human engineers worked with desperate efficiency to ready weapons that had never been tested. Some of these devices could crack planets in half, while others could turn the air itself into acid. Dr. Song had been running medical supplies to refugee camps when the execution broadcast reached her ship. Now she ordered her crew to dump the medicine and load chemical weapons instead. Her transport was not built for war, but it could carry enough poison to kill everything on an Imperial world teacher. Yoon was evacuating children from a contested system when she saw Kim Tae die. Her school ship was filled with 300 young students who were fleeing the war. Now she gave orders that turned her vessel into a flying bomb. The children would be safe, but the Empire would learn what happened when they hurt human kids. The fifth minute brought something unprecedented in galactic history. A united human fleet was forming not through orders or organization, but through shared purpose. Democrats and communists flew wing-to-wing. Christians and Buddhists worked together to arm their ships. Rich merchants and poor miners volunteered for the same suicide missions. Captain Kwan commanded a small destroyer that had been built for exploration, not warfare. But his ship carried mining charges powerful enough to crack asteroids, and now those charges would crack Imperial skulls. His crew voted unanimously to join the growing fleet, even though they knew they would not survive the battle. Colonel Kim had been planning guerrilla operations from her hidden base when the broadcast changed everything. Now she loaded her assault troops onto civilian freighters and headed for the nearest Imperial colony. The aliens thought they were safe behind their energy shields, but they were about to learn the difference between conquest and extermination. The sixth minute saw the impossible become reality. The largest military force in human history was accelerating toward every imperial system at the same time. They had no central command, no supply lines, no plan. Except destruction ships that had been enemies the day before now flew in perfect formation, united by grief and rage. Admiral Co brought her battlecruiser group out of hiding in the Horsehead Nebula. She had been waiting for the perfect moment to strike at Imperial shipping lanes, but perfect moments were luxuries they could no longer afford. Her ships were outnumbered 10-1, but numbers meant nothing to the dead merchant Captain Choi had spent 3 years trading with neutral systems and avoiding Imperial patrols. His cargo holds were filled with rare metals and luxury goods, but now he dumped everything and loaded volunteers instead. His ship was not armed, but every person on board carried mining equipment that could be turned into weapons. The 7th minute brought the final preparations. Weapons were armed, engines were pushed beyond safe limits, and crew members recorded final messages for families they would never see again. These humans were not planning to survive. Their attacks, they were planning to take as many aliens with them as possible. Private Park was only 19 years old and had joined the Resistance 6 months ago. He had never killed anyone and had spent most of his time maintaining communications. Equipment. Now he volunteered for the most dangerous boarding actions because someone had to make the Empire pay for what they had done. Engineer Cho worked frantically to modify civilian mining equipment into military weapons. Her fusion cutters could slice through starship armor, and her excavation charges could collapse underground bunkers. She had 3 daughters safe in a hidden colony, and every weapon she made was revenge for Kim Tae and protection for her children. The 8th minute arrived like the final countdown to Judgment Day. Every human ship in the galaxy was moving toward Imperial space at maximum burn. They carried weapons of mass destruction, volunteers ready to die, and a cold fury that would not be stopped by any force in the universe. Captain Yang commanded the merchant vessel. Good fortune, but there was nothing fortunate about what he was planning. His ship would ram the orbital defense station protecting the Imperial world of Nexus Prime. The impact would kill everyone on both sides, but it would also leave the planet defenseless. Admiral Wang emerged from the deep space where her fleet had been hiding for 2 years. She commanded the most powerful warships humanity had ever built, but even they were no match for the Imperial Navy in open battle. That was why she had loaded every ship with antimatter bombs that would turn defeat into mutual annihilation as the 8th minute ended. Something had changed forever in the galaxy. The Empire had executed one boy to teach humans their place, but instead they had awakened something that had been sleeping in the human heart. The boy had died alone, but his death would be avenged by millions. The broadcast had lasted 30 seconds, but it had created the largest military force in galactic history. Every human ship was now a weapon. Every human citizen was now a soldier, and every Imperial world was now a target. The aliens had wanted to teach humans about power, but they were about to learn about consequences. Kim Tae was dead, but his death had united humanity in a way that nothing else could have achieved. The boy had thrown a rock at an Imperial truck and died for it. Now millions of rocks were flying toward Imperial space, but these rocks burned with nuclear fire and human rage. The 8 minutes were over. The real war was about to begin. The morning sun rose over Seoul, but the city felt cold and dead. The Galactic Empire had taken Earth 3 months ago, and everything had changed. The tall buildings still stood, but now alien ships floated between them like metal sharks. They're blue. Energy beams had turned the Han River into steam and melted half the bridges Commander Vex stood on the platform they had built in the main square. His purple skin gleamed in the sunlight, and his 4 arms moved as he checked his weapons, the translator. Box on his chest turned his words into human language, but his voice still sounded like grinding metal. He enjoyed these moments when he could show the humans their place. 10,000 people filled the square because the Empire had ordered them to come. Anyone who stayed home would be shot. The crowd stood silent and afraid. Parents held their children close and tried to cover their eyes, but the alien soldiers made sure everyone was watching. This was how the Empire taught lessons to new slaves. Kim Tae stood in chains at the center of the platform. He was 15 years old with black hair and school clothes that were now torn and dirty. His hands were bound behind his back and his feet were chained to the metal floor. The boy had been caught 3 days ago after throwing a rock at an Imperial transport truck. The rock had made a small scratch in the paint. His sister Kim Na cried in the front row of the crowd. She was only 12 and did not understand why her brother had to die for such a small thing. Their parents, Kim Soo and Kim Bo, held her tight, but they were crying too. The whole family had begged the aliens to take them instead, but Commander Vex had laughed and said the boy would make a better example. The floating cameras moved around the platform like silver birds. They would broadcast this execution to every human settlement in the galaxy. The Empire wanted all humans to see what happened when they fought back. Even the smallest act of rebellion would be punished with death. This was how they kept their slaves afraid. Commander Vex raised his plasma rifle and the crowd grew even more quiet. The weapon hummed with deadly energy that could turn a human body to ash in seconds. He had killed thousands of beings from dozens of worlds, and this was just another day of work. The boy was nothing special, just another lesson that needed to be taught. Tae looked up at the cameras and spoke in Korean. His voice was clear and strong, even though he was about to die. The alien translators could not understand the old dialect he used, but every human in the crowd heard him clearly. He said the ancient words that Korean warriors had spoken before battle for thousands of years. The boy looked at his family and smiled. He was not crying or begging for mercy like most of the Empire's victims. His dark eyes held no fear, only a deep sadness for the world his people would inherit. He thought about his little sister and hoped she would survive long enough. To see better days, Commander Vex was getting impatient with the delay. He wanted to finish this execution and return to his ship for the victory celebration tonight. The humans had been completely defeated, and their planet was now just another source of slaves and resources for the Empire. Soon, they would forget they had ever been free. The plasma rifle charged to full power with a sound like thunder. The blue energy inside the barrel grew brighter and hotter until it could melt through solid. Steel Vex aimed at the boy's chest and prepared to fire. He had done this same thing on 50 other worlds, and it never got old. Kim Tae closed his eyes and whispered one more prayer in Korean. He asked his ancestors to protect his family and to remember that he had died fighting for his people. The words were so quiet that only the closest cameras could record them. But they would echo across the galaxy in ways no one could imagine. The blast echoed across Seoul like the end of the world. The blue plasma bolt struck the boy in the chest, and his body turned to light for just a moment before disappearing completely. Nothing was left but empty chains and a small burn mark on the metal platform. The crowd gasped, but no one dared to. Scream Commander Vex smiled and raised his rifle above his head in victory. The other alien soldiers cheered and fired their weapons into the air. The floating cameras captured every moment of their celebration. These images would be broadcast to every human colony as a reminder of Imperial power. Kim Na collapsed to her knees and her parents had to carry her away from the square. The other humans began to leave in silence, their faces empty of all hope. The Empire had won completely, and there was nothing left to fight for. Their children would grow up as slaves and never know freedom. But something else was happening that the aliens did not notice. In space stations and hidden bases across the galaxy, humans were watching the broadcast. On secret screens, they saw the boy die and heard his final words in Korean. The ancient warrior's prayer had been recorded by the cameras without the aliens knowing what it meant. Admiral Park was on his flagship in the asteroid belt when he received the transmission. His weathered face showed no emotion as he watched Kim Tae die, but his hands slowly formed fists on the command table. Around him, the bridge crew stood in complete silence as the broadcast ended. Captain Lee Jin was the first to speak, but her voice was barely a whisper. She had 2 children of her own safe in a hidden colony, and now she imagined them in chains on some alien platform. The thought made her sick, but it also made her angry in a way she had never felt before. Similar scenes were playing out on every human ship in the galaxy. Pirates and Navy officers watched the same broadcast and felt the same cold rage building in their hearts. The boy had died bravely, but he had died alone, and that was something no human could accept. Chief Engineer Han opened weapon lockers that had been sealed since the war began. Inside were the most terrible weapons humanity had ever created, bombs that could crack planets and poisons that could kill stars. These weapons had been too dangerous to use against the Empire, but now everything had changed. In the deepest parts of space, human colonies received the broadcast and began to move. Civilian ships loaded with families started their engines and headed for secret meeting points that had been planned years ago. They knew the aliens would come for them next, but they also knew they would not die alone. The Empire thought the execution would end human resistance forever, but they had made a terrible mistake. They had killed a child in front of his family and broadcast it to every human in the galaxy. Now something was waking up in the darkness between stars, something that had slept since the first days of the war. Kim Tae was dead, but his death had lit a fire that would burn across the galaxy. The boy had thrown 1 rock at an alien truck and died for it. Now 10 million humans were preparing to throw rocks of their own, but these rocks would be made of nuclear fire and righteous anger. The execution was over, but the real war was about to begin. High Admiral Zarkon had conquered 40 species in his long career and crushed 100 rebellions, but nothing had prepared him for the reports flooding in from every corner of his empire. Entire star systems were going dark within hours of human contact, and the attacks showed no sign of slowing down. He stood in the command center of his flagship, Eternal Dominion, studying holographic displays that showed red zones where human forces had struck. The pattern made no military sense. They were not capturing strategic resources or establishing supply lines. They were simply destroying everything they could reach. "How many ships do they have?" Zarkon demanded from his intelligence chief, Admiral Vorth, who was frantically sorting through data tablets. "Sir, we estimate they deployed over 10,000 vessels simultaneously across 50 systems. That should be impossible. Our scouts reported their total fleet strength as barely 300 ships." The truth was worse than impossible. The humans had turned their entire civilian population into a military force. Cargo haulers carried nuclear weapons, school ships housed antimatter bombs, and medical transports delivered poison gas. Every human vessel had become a weapon aimed at. Imperial Heart's Captain Zex rushed into the command center carrying more bad news. "Sir, we have lost contact with Fortress Command on Drac Colony 7 on Xerion Prime and the entire Helix system. The last transmission from Commander Thex warned that the humans are not taking prisoners." Zarkon felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had seen species fight desperately when facing extinction, but this was different. The humans were not trying to survive. They were trying to drag the Empire down to hell with them. Their attacks showed perfect coordination without any central command. Admiral Vorth pointed to the tactical display with one of his forearms. "Sir, they are not following any logical strategy. Instead of capturing valuable worlds, they are hitting luxury colonies, resort planets, and civilian targets. They seem to be choosing targets based on emotional impact rather than military value." The realization hit Zarkon like a physical blow. They are not trying to win a war. They are trying to make us suffer. They want every Imperial citizen to feel the fear and helplessness that their boy felt when he died on that platform. The boy whose name had become a battle cry across the galaxy intelligence reports were coming. In faster than they could be processed, human ships were appearing in systems that should have been impossible to reach, using routes through asteroid fields and nebulae that no sane navigator would attempt. They were taking risks that should have destroyed them, but somehow they kept coming. "Sir, we are receiving evacuation requests from over 200 colonies," reported Communications Officer Lex. "The local governors are panicking. Many are requesting permission to abandon their worlds. Rather than wait for human attack, most are offering to pay for their own transport." Zarkon studied the galactic map and saw his empire crumbling in real time. Colonies that had been loyal for centuries were declaring independence rather than face. Human retribution trade routes that had operated for millennia were being abandoned as merchants fled to neutral space. The Empire's response was swift, and massive battle fleets that had been scattered across the galaxy began converging on human space. The dreadnought fury of conquest alone carried enough firepower to sterilize a dozen worlds. Its crew of 20,000 aliens were the finest warriors in the galaxy Admiral Krell commanded, Task Force Annihilation, which consisted of 50 battleships and 300 smaller vessels. He had orders to find Earth and make an example that would break human resistance once and for all. His ships jumped to hyperspace carrying the concentrated fury of Imperial power. But when Task Force Annihilation arrived at the coordinates where Earth should have been, they found only empty space and debris from ancient battles. The planet was gone, not destroyed, but moved, as if an entire world had simply packed up and left with no forwarding. A single transmission buoy floated where Earth's moon used to orbit. Admiral Krell activated it personally and heard a message that chilled his alien blood. "You killed our boy. We have moved our families somewhere. You will never find them. Now, we are coming for yours." The message was signed with Korean characters that burned themselves into memory. The coordinates of every Imperial world were attached to the transmission, along with detailed intelligence about military defenses, civilian populations, and the personal addresses of government officials. The humans had been planning this moment for years, and they knew exactly where to find every alien who had ever hurt them. Admiral Vorth's voice cracked as he reported to High Command. "Sir, they are not protecting anything anymore. Every human world has been evacuated completely. They have turned their entire species into a mobile military force, with no fixed targets for us to retaliate against." The reports kept pouring in. Imperial. Colonies requesting emergency evacuation, luxury resorts emptying as wealthy aliens fled to the core worlds, military bases abandoning their positions rather than face human assault. The mere rumor of human ships approaching a system caused mass panic. Governor Call of the industrial world. Vex 9 sent a desperate message. "The humans are not behaving like any enemy we have ever faced. They do not negotiate, they do not retreat, and they do not care about their own survival. Every attack is a suicide mission, designed for maximum destruction." Zarkon realized that the Empire was facing something unprecedented in galactic history. The humans had collectively decided to choose death over slavery, and they were taking their decision very seriously. Every human ship was a guided missile aimed at alien hearts, Sir reported Tactical Officer Gex. "We are receiving reports of human infiltration teams on 17 core worlds. They appear to be targeting civilian populations specifically, Imperial families with children. The psychological impact is devastating." The infiltrators were not soldiers. They were parents, teachers, and ordinary citizens who had decided that alien children should know the same fear that Kim Tae had known. Their weapons were simple but effective: poison in water supplies, bombs in school cafeterias, knives in the dark. Captain Min had been dead for 2 days, but her crew kept fighting. Her ship was a burning wreck, but they had ejected in escape pods and landed on the luxury world of Paradise 7. Now they moved through alien neighborhoods, like ghosts, killing families while they slept. The Empire's most elite troops, the Shadow Legion, were deployed to hunt down these infiltrators. These warriors had never known defeat in 3 centuries of conquest, but they found themselves outmatched by humans who fought with suicidal determination and refused to be taken alive. Colonel Kim met 50 Shadow Legion warriors on Mining Station Omega with only 12 human soldiers. The battle lasted 6 minutes. When Imperial reinforcements arrived, they found the station's reactor set to overload and a message painted on the walls in alien blood. Tay remembers us all. Zarkon's empire was not just losing territory. It was losing the will to fight. His own officers were requesting transfers to distant sectors. Colonial governors were abandoning their posts. Military contractors were canceling supply agreements. The humans had turned the galaxy against itself, sir. Admiral Vorth reported with obvious fear, "Our psychological warfare department believes the humans are not capable of negotiation. They have entered a collective mental state that our xenopsychologists classify as species-wide berserker rage. Nothing will stop them except total victory or total extinction." The High Admiral stared at the holographic display showing the red zones where human ships had struck. The pattern was spreading like a virus across his empire. Each successful attack inspired more humans to volunteer for suicide missions while terrorizing more aliens into flight. Imperial Command had ruled 1,000 species for millennia through fear and overwhelming force. But fear was a weapon that cut both ways, and now the Empire's own citizens were more afraid of human revenge than they were of Imperial punishment. The system was collapsing from within. How long before they reached the core worlds? Zarkon asked. Though he already knew the answer, Admiral Vorth checked his calculations and delivered the death sentence. At their current rate of advance, sir, approximately 72 hours, the humans are not slowing down. 3 days after Kim Tae died, Imperial worlds were burning at the rate of 12 per hour. The humans had abandoned every pretense of civilized warfare and embraced methods that made veteran alien soldiers wake up screaming. They took no prisoners, accepted no surrenders, and showed no mercy to anyone who wore Imperial colors. Captain Kwan's assault team infiltrated the luxury resort planet of Veltar, where Imperial officers brought their families for golden beaches and crystal waters. The planet had been untouched by war for 3 centuries, but that peace ended when 50 humans landed in the tropical paradise, carrying weapons that left no trace. The humans moved through the resort cities like silent death using molecular disruptors that reduced living tissue to dust while leaving clothes and jewelry undisturbed. By dawn, 5,000 wealthy aliens had simply vanished from their hotel rooms and beach houses, leaving only empty garments fluttering in the Ocean Breeze Hotel. Manager Zix found the first empty clothes in the presidential suite, where Admiral Plex had been celebrating his promotion. A uniform lay perfectly arranged on the bed, as if the wearer had simply evaporated. The only sign of violence was a faint smell of ozone and a small pile of dust that had once been a war hero. The resort's security forces tried to fight back, but they were trained to handle drunk tourists. Not human commandos who had nothing left to lose, Captain Kwan's team used the hotel's own systems against them, poisoning the air recycling, filling the swimming pools with acid, and turning the gardens into minefields. By the time Imperial reinforcements arrived, Veltar looked like a normal vacation planet, except that every alien visitor had disappeared. The humans had vanished too, but they left behind a message written in the alien alphabet using what appeared to be purple blood. "Your children will know our pain." The Empire's most elite troops, the Shadow Legion, were deployed to stop the human advance. These warriors had conquered entire star systems and never known defeat in 3 centuries of warfare, but they had never faced humans who viewed death as victory and pain as payment for old debts. Colonel Kim met the Shadow Legion on the asteroid mining station. Series 7, with just 50 human soldiers, the aliens outnumbered them 20 to 1 and carried weapons that could cut through starship armor. The battle should have been a massacre, but the humans had prepared surprises. Every corridor had been booby-trapped, every air vent filled with poison gas, and every computer terminal rigged with explosive charges. The Shadow Legion found themselves fighting not just soldiers but the station itself, which had been turned into a mechanical predator that hunted alien flesh. The battle lasted exactly 6 minutes. When Imperial reinforcements arrived, they found the station's nuclear reactor set to overload and a message painted on the walls in alien blood that glowed under the emergency lighting. "Kim Tae remembers, and so do we." The reactor exploded 17 seconds later. On the diplomatic world of Harmony Station, Ambassador Park had spent 5 years negotiating for better treatment of human prisoners and slaves. The aliens had made promises they never intended to keep, and Park had smiled and pretended to believe them while planning his revenge. During a peace conference attended by representatives from 12 imperial species, Park calmly walked into the council chambers carrying what appeared to be a briefcase full of documents. But inside the case was a singularity bomb that had been built in the deepest human laboratories. Park activated the device while looking directly into the eyes of Chancellor Vex, who had personally signed the order to execute Kim Tae. "This is for the boy," he said, in perfect Imperial standard. The entire station collapsed into a microscopic black hole that evaporated 12 seconds later. The aliens began to understand that they were not fighting soldiers anymore. They were facing an entire species that had collectively decided that death was preferable to dishonor. Human civilians volunteered for suicide missions with smiles on their faces. Parents kissed their children goodbye and flew ships into Imperial battle stations. Captain Lee's medical transport was supposed to evacuate wounded civilians from the border worlds, but instead, she loaded her cargo holds with experimental biological weapons. Her ship looked like a harmless rescue vessel until it released clouds of toxins that could kill anything with Imperial DNA. The poison spread through the atmosphere of Colony World 9 like invisible fire. Alien families died in their homes while eating dinner. Children collapsed in playgrounds while their parents watched in horror. The death was quick and painless, but it was also total and irreversible. Chief Engineer Han had been developing mining equipment when the war changed everything. Now he turned fusion cutters into weapons that could slice through starship hulls and excavation charges into bombs that could collapse entire cities. His tools of creation became instruments of annihilation. Private Jung was barely 18 when he volunteered for the most dangerous mission in human history. Leading a team of teenagers armed with nothing but mining equipment, he infiltrated the Imperial Naval Academy on Warrior's World. The academy had trained officers for 500 years. The young humans moved through the dormitories like ghosts, killing future Imperial commanders while they slept in their beds. Jung himself strangled Cadet Czar, who had boasted about wanting to command a slave transport. The boy was only 16, but he would never grow up to hurt humans. Imperial psychiatrist Dr. Kent studied captured human communications and made a terrifying discovery. She reported to High Command with obvious fear in her voice. "They are not angry. Any more anger would make them emotional and beatable. They have moved beyond rage into something colder. They are calculating now." She continued, "Every attack is precisely planned for maximum psychological impact. They want us to know that they can reach anyone, anywhere, at any time. They want our children to be afraid to sleep and our families to flee their homes." The humans had weaponized their own grief, turning sorrow into strategy and pain into power. They studied Imperial culture and psychology to find the most effective ways to inflict trauma. Every attack was designed not just to kill, but to terrorize the survivors. Admiral Seo's battlecruiser group emerged from hyperspace in the middle of the Imperial core fleet, using coordinates provided by human spies who had infiltrated alien society years ago. The surprise was complete. and the carnage was magnificent as human ships rammed Imperial dreadnoughts without hesitation. Captain Yoon's cargo vessel. Happy Trader looked harmless, until it split open to reveal nuclear warheads arranged like flower petals. The ship flew directly into the bridge of the Imperial flagship Eternal Dominion and detonated with enough force to crack the ship's spine in half. The aliens tried to surrender, but the humans would not listen. Imperial officers threw down their weapons and begged for mercy, but the humans had seen Kim Tae die on. 7 days after the broadcast, the Empire controlled only a handful of core worlds protected by their largest fleets. Everything else was ash and memory. The humans had burned through 1,000 years of conquest in a single week, but they were far from finished. Admiral Park's flagship appeared at the edge of the Imperial home system, alone except for a small escort of destroyers. The massive defensive fleet that protected the capital world outnumbered him 100 to 1. High Admiral Zarkon himself came on the communication channel, his translator struggling with alien desperation. "Human Admiral, we can negotiate. Your people have made their point. We can discuss terms, reparations, anything you want." Park's weathered face showed no emotion as he replied in perfect Imperial standard, learned during years of captivity. "You killed a boy for scratching your paint. Now learn what humans do when you hurt our children." The small human fleet charged directly into the defensive formation. Every ship was a flying bomb, packed with antimatter charges that had been meant for mining operations. Park's flagship struck the orbital fortress protecting the capital, and for 3 seconds, a new sun blazed in the system's sky. The chain reaction consumed the entire Imperial fleet, and the energy wave sterilized every moon and asteroid in the system. The capital, world's atmosphere ignited, turning the proud Imperial home into a crematorium that would burn for 1,000 years. In the final transmission, Park's voice echoed across the galaxy. "Kim Tae has been avenged. The war was over, but the Empire was finished. The surviving colonies declared independence, the client species rebelled, and the vast imperial bureaucracy simply collapsed." In the years that followed, alien historians would struggle to understand how the execution of one human boy had destroyed the galaxy's greatest power in just 8 days. The humans never returned to claim territory or demand tribute. They had made their point and vanished back into the deep space between the stars. But every species in the galaxy remembered the lesson: never harm a human child, because humans will burn down the universe itself to make you pay for it. Kim Tae's name became known across 1,000 worlds, not as a victim, but as the boy whose death had rewritten the laws of galactic civilization forever.